Assalamu Alaikum, peace be upon everyone. So today we're going to continue the series on how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula, and I'm going to be doing example 3 today. But I must tell you that I'm going to be doing a different strategy because for example 1 and example 2 I went into detail. I'm also going to be going through through the material with detail in example 3, but I'm also going to give you guys an opportunity to answer 2 questions on your own. So for this video, and the question for example 3 is 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. So the first thing you have to do when you're still learning the process and understanding material is to write the standard form of the quadratic equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So where a is not equals to 0, and just like I explained in example 2, we have to put a condition here because we don't want the value of a here to be 0, because if the value of a is equals to 0, this basically makes this whole term here to not exist anymore, and what we have left is this term here, bx plus c equals 0. So this is what we're going to have left, and because this is what we're going to have left, we don't necessarily have a quadratic equation anymore. We have a linear equation. So basically a summary of this explanation is we put this condition here because we're solving for a quadratic equation. If we weren't solving for a quadratic equation, it would be understandable if this wasn't existing, but because we're solving, this has to exist, because if this value is 0, then x squared times 0 is going to be 0, so this value here will not exist anymore, and it will change this whole equation here from a quadratic equation to a linear equation. But we don't want a linear equation, so we have to put this condition. So that's just like a brief explanation of how things work. I'm going to erase it now and start solving it. I'm just teaching you guys more of like the material so that you'll understand the reason why certain things are there. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So now we start the process of solving. So here we can see that the coefficient of x squared is a, meaning the constant value in front of x squared is a, and here the constant value in front of x squared is 4, and we look here, we have a and we have 4, so we have a equals to 4 when we compare both equations. Here the constant value in front of x is b. Here we do not have a constant value in front of x, or basically we don't have a coefficient of x here because that term doesn't exist. And because that term doesn't exist, we would now assume that the constant value of x in this particular equation is 0, because if it was a different constant, we're going to multiply it by an unknown, which in this case is x. We're going to understand, but because of we don't have that here, we just understand and know that the coefficient of x here is 0, so that's why that term doesn't exist. Just like I explained earlier, like 2 minutes into the video, like the reason why ax cannot be equals to 0. So that's the same thinking you apply in this one. So for c, which is the constant, we know that here c is basically constant. We compare to this equation, c here, the constant is -9. So now that we've broken down the equation, then we apply the quadratic formula, and we know the quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So the process just involves us putting this term here, a equals to 4 here and here, this term here, b equals to 0 here and here, and then this term here, c equals to -9 here. So that's the process. And then when we put in all the values and we solve, we're going to get the values of x. So x equals -0 plus or minus, then 0 squared minus 4 times 4 times -9, and then 2 times 4. So now we've substituted the values of a, b, and c into the quadratic equation. Then we proceed to constantly solving. So my negative minus 0, this basically is just 0, plus or minus. So we have 0 minus 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 9 is 4 times 4 is 16. And 16 times -9 is, what do you guys think? Let me actually input that into my calculator. 4 times. So we have 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times -9 is basically positive 144, because this negative value and this negative value is going to make this whole multiplication over here to become positive. So this is going to be positive 144 over 2 times 4 is 8. So this is it here. So x equals 0 plus or minus negative 144 over 8. So we continue to here. So x equals 0 plus or minus 12 over 8. So x equals, so one thing I should also explain, just like I did in example 1 and example 2, is this: anytime you're solving for an equation, it is important for you to know this. If you're solving for a quadratic equation where the highest power of the unknown, in this case x, is 2, you're supposed to expect 2 values of x. If you're solving for a linear equation where the highest exponent of x is 1, you're going to expect a value of 1. If you're solving a cubic equation where the highest power of the unknown or exponent of the unknown is 3, that's a cubic equation. So for example, x cubed minus 9 equals 0. Here the highest power of this equation here is 3. You should expect that there are going to be 3 values of x. The same thing here, where the highest value of this equation, highest value of the power of the unknown is 2. We're supposed to expect 2 values of x. So because we have this now, we have 0 plus or minus 12. So important thing for you to know, since we need 2 values of x to solve this equation, this x squared right here, this plus or minus sign right here, is what differentiates and distinguishes the 2 values of x. So this plus or minus sign is what breaks it down and what breaks down the information. So this is basically the determining or distinguishing factor. Distinguishing factor that separates the values of x1 from x2 from each other and makes them unique, makes them different. So we have x sub 1 or x1 equals 0 plus 12 over 8. So we have x sub 1 equals 0 plus 8. So x sub 1 is 12 over 8. So we have to simplify. 4 in 8 is 2 and 4 in 12 is 3. So x sub 1 equals 3 over 2. We can't break 3 over 2 down any longer. So that's what we have. Then we proceed to x sub 2. Because we've used a plus sign first to distinguish the value of x1, we're now going to use the negative sign to distinguish the value of x sub 2. So this is going to be 0 minus 12 over 8. X sub 2 equals negative 12 over 8. 4 here 2, 4 here negative 3. So x sub 2 equals negative 3 over 2. And this is the value here. So now that we've solved for it, we have the values of x sub 1 and x sub 2 to be x sub 1 equals equals positive 3 over 2, and x sub 2 equals negative 3 over 2. So now that we have the values, like I explained to you in the previous two videos of, for example 1 and example 2, I explained to you guys that anytime you're like in an exam or you're studying yourself and you don't have like your teacher, your professor to like assist you, you can just try and find to see if your answers are correct. You can just do your own passing out check, and I'm going to do it here again just so you guys see what a check is. A check is just a way for you to be sure you have the right answer in math. So when I was learning math, because I wasn't really sure of myself, I used to do this a lot. So basically you have to put these two values back into the first equation given. If you can put this value x sub 1 and x sub 2 at different times and put them here into this equation, the equation that was given to us, and the left side and the right side is going to give you the same value, that means the answer you solved for is correct. So we start with x sub 1. So we start with x sub 1 equals 3 over 2. So 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. And we can solve this by putting x sub 1 equals 3 over 2 into this value here to see if the left side and the right side is equal. So 4 times 3 over 2 squared minus 9 equals 0. That is going to be equals to 2 here 1, 2 here 2. 2 times 3 is 6. Oh, sorry. Oh my god, you don't do that. I'm so sorry, you guys. You don't do that. I completely forgot that there was an x squared here. So I'm going to rub that off and do it again. So that's why, like, even as like a tutor, you still have to consistently check your work, just like you're doing an exam or you're doing a test or you're just doing an assignment. So x sub 1 equals like 3 over 2, and then 4x squared minus 9 equals to 0. So I'm going to put it substitute right now. So that's going to be equals to 3 over 2 squared minus 9 equals 0. So 3 squared we know is 9, 2 squared is 4, times the 4 that drops down here, and then 9. So 4 divided by 4, because you divided two of them since this is a fraction and all of that. So now what we have is we now have 9 coming down. So 9 minus 9 equals 0. 0 equals 0. So alhamdulillah, we got the right answer because the left side and the right side is equals to the same value. So basically that's how you solve for in maths to see if you have the right answer. So here we do. Thank God. So we have the next one to be x sub 2 equals to negative 3 over 2. And we see that we're going to put this value again into this, the same thing we did for x sub 1, we're going to do it for x sub 2. So 4x squared minus 9 equals to 0. 4 times negative 3 over 2 squared minus 9 equals to 0. Just checking. So 4 times negative 3 squared is just 9, and 2 squared is 4. Negative 9 equals to 0. 4 divided by 4 here, so 9 minus 9 equals to 0. And then we just have the 9 minus 9 is just 0, and 0 equals 0. So we have the right answer here again. So that means our check worked out well. And since our check worked out well, and what we suspected to be the values are actually the values, because when we put it back into this equation, the left side and the right side gives us the same value. So this is just like my explanation for example 3. Now we're done solving example 3. We're going to go on to do the practice problems I promised you guys. So the way this is going to work is basically for me to give you the question. You pause the video, you attempt the question, and then you play the video, and we're going to do it together. So the first question we have is this. 6x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. So pause the video. Okay, now I'm playing. So the first thing we're going to do is how I explained to you guys. You're going to have like the standard form of the quadratic equation, and usually when you were learning, you were putting it to the side and then like comparing. So now we don't have to do that process because we've seen it so many times. So what first thing we're going to do is just write the values down. So a here, which is the coefficient of x squared, is going to be equals to 6. B, the coefficient of x, is going to be equals to -1. And then c, which is just the constant of the quadratic equation, which is equals to -1. So now that you have this value, you just input it into the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is, we have that to be x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So x equals -1 plus or minus, now we have the square root to be -1 squared minus 4 times 6 times -1 over 2 times 6. So x equals -1, that's +1, plus or minus -1 squared is 1, minus 4 times 6 is 24, but 24 times -1 is -24, but we still have this value here that is negative, so the negative here and the negative here is going to basically become positive. So we have here to be positive, so 4 times 6 times 1 is 24 over 2 times 6 is 12. Before we proceed, I have to tell you guys this. So for those of you that enjoy math and will continue doing math in future, it's very important for you to actually memorize the quadratic formula. This is not a formula that you're going to be consistently given. It's a formula that as a mathematician or someone who's going to be doing physical sciences, engineering, or technology, this is a formula that you're going to be seeing quite commonly. So it is not something you're just going to learn and then put to one side. It's something you actually have to memorize. So now we continue. X equals 1 plus or minus square root of 25 over 12. Sorry, that looks weird. I'll be right here. X equals 1 plus or minus square root of 25 over 12. X equals 1 plus or minus 5 over 12, so that, which is the square root of 25. So the next thing you have to do is, as soon as we've been given like the x value, because of we're dealing with a quadratic equation where the highest power of the unknown is 2, we're supposed to expect 2 values of the unknown, which is x. So we expect 2 values of x. So where we have x sub 1, which is 1 value of x, and then we have x sub 2, which is 2, the second value of x. So here we solve for x sub 1. Let's like separate it. X sub 1 here, we're going to use the positive sign, and this plus or minus sign is what is going to distinguish the x plus 1 and x plus from x plus 2. So for x sub 1, we're going to use the 1 plus 5 over 12, and the x sub 2, we're going to have 1 minus 5 over 12. So now we solve. X sub 1 is 1 plus 5 is basically 6 over 12, and x sub 1 is 6 over 12 is 1, 6 here, 1, 6 here, 2, 1 over 2. So that's the answer for x sub 1. And then the second value, or the second root, is x sub 2. 1 minus 5 is just basically -4 over 12. So 4 here is going to be 1, and 4 here is going to be 3. But we still have this negative value here, so we then have x sub 2 to be -1 over 3. So those are the two values that we've solved for. Now we're going to do the check, and this time around I'm going to have the check to be blue. And yep, so this is what we have for the check. So x sub 1 equals 1 over 2, and we put this value back into the quadratic equation. I'm sorry that's just smudged. But x sub 1 will be put back into 6x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. So we have 6 times 1 over 2 squared minus 1 over 2 minus 1 equals 0. So 6 times 1 squared is, 1 over 2 squared is 1 over 4, minus half minus 1 equals 0. So basically 2 here, 2 here, 3. So we have 3 halves minus 1 half minus 1 equals 0. 3 halves minus 1 half. For those of you who don't really know, we can just do this right here. Put this right here, and then we have the standard. So we can get like common denominator. We can put 2 here. So 2 into 2 is 1. 1 times 2 is 3. And 2 into 2 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. So 3 minus 1 minus 1 equals 0. This is the minus 1 that comes down here. So 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 over 2 is just simply 1. 1 minus 1 equals 0. So 0 equals 0. So alhamdulillah, we have the correct answer here. So that is done. Now we're going to do for x sub 2 to see if we put this equation back into an equation like this, if we're going to have the left side and the right side to be the same. If we have the left side and the right side to be the same, that means we got the right answer. So now I'm going to erase this so that we can create space for solving x sub 2. So if you had the if you're getting the same answers as me, that means like we're doing your work right. And if you're not, just look over your work again and look at what I'm doing and then see where you missed it. I'm gonna clean this off too so that I can write properly. So back to writing. This is the first equation we have is 6x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. If you remember. So now we do the check for x sub 2. So x sub 2 is equal to negative 1 over 3. So we can just put it back into this equation. 6x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. And for those of you who don't know, like, you don't have to do the check in an exam or whatever. It's just something for you to make sure you have the right answer, especially because like you might be studying on your own and you might not always have like a professor or a tutor beside you. So 6 over negative 1 over 3 squared minus 1 minus 1 over 3, because this minus comes down here and the x value here is negative 1 over 3 minus 1 equals 0. So negative 1 squared is just basically 6 times negative 1 squared is 1, 3 squared is 9, minus, now we see minus here, we put minus here, we can just make it and to neutralize it and becomes positive. So basically positive 1 over 3 minus 1 equals 0. So 3 here 2, 3 here 3. So what we have is 2 over 3 plus 1 over 3 minus 1 equals 0. So this is the common denominator is 3. And then we have 3 in 3, 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 in 3 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. So 3 plus 1 minus 1 equals 0. So 3 over 3 is just basically 1. Minus 1 equals 0. So 0 equals 0. Alhamdulillah, we got the right answer. So that means the values x sub 1 equals 1 over 2 and x sub 2 equals negative 1 over 3 are actually the values of the unknown that you get when you solve this equation. So that means the values we got are correct. So now we're going to move on to the second question. So the question is x squared minus 2x minus 2 equals 0. So now the first thing we have to do is to write the coefficient of x squared. In this case, this is 1. Then to write the coefficient of x, in this case is -2. And then the constant value in the quadratic equation given for us to solve. And the constant value c equals -2. So we do the same process, write the quadratic formula. And we have x, which is the unknown that we're solving for, equals -b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So x equals -2 plus or minus -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -2. Everything over 2 times 1. So x equals negative times negative is just positive. So 2 plus or minus the square root. -2 squared is 4. So the negative here times the negative here is going to make this value to be positive. So we have positive here. Then we have 4 times 2 is 8. So we have 8 here over 2. So we continue. X equals 2 plus or minus square root of 12 over 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus. So we have this, we can make it like this square root of 12 and basically break it down so that we can solve it easily. So we can just do and make it the square root of 12. The square root of 12 to be the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. And an important thing for you to know is anytime you can basically, like, anytime you're given something in a square root, you can break or simplify the information, because anything, so for example now, AB in a square root is the same thing as square root of A times the square root of B. So that is the same process here. We know 4 times 3 is 12, and we have 12 inside. We can just basically separate. So this is what I'm doing here, so no one needs to get confused. So over 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 is 2, and we have root 3 over 2. X equals 2 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 2. So this is basically what we have. And something we can just do here, I just rewrote it so that it to be like neater. And then the next thing you can just simply do is to basically go through the process of like distinguishing the two values of x. Since we have x squared and we're solving for a quadratic equation, so we're supposed to expect two values of the unknown here, which is x. So now we solve for x1, and we're going to leave it with the positive sign. So 2 plus 2 root 3, and we can do this x sub 1 equals, over 2. So we can do this as 2 over 2 plus 2 root 3 over 2. So 2 year 1, 2 year 1, 2 year 1, 2 year 1. So x sub 1 equals 1 plus root 3. Then we have x sub 2, basically 2 minus 2 root 3 over 2. So for this one now, the first one we use the plus sign, the second one we use the negative sign, because we're basically solving for roots. We're basically like solving for the roots of the quadratic equation, or we're basically solving for the two values of the quadratic equation. So 2 will be 2 over 2 minus 2 root 3 over 2, because we're allowed to split we're allowed to split the numerator using the denominator. So 2 here, 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, 1. So x sub 2 can have the value 1 minus root 3. So the two answers that we got from solving this is 1 plus root 3 and 1 minus root 3. So now this is what we're basically solving for, and this is the answer we get. So now we can also do the check. So we're going to do the check right here. So this is the check. And the first one we're going to pick is, let's do x sub 1, which is 1 plus root 3. And we're going to substitute it into the equation x squared minus 2x minus 2 equals 0. So we have 1 plus root 3 squared minus 2, 1 plus root 3 minus 2 equals 0. And we want the left side and the right side to be the same value. And when we solve for that, we can go on. So we're going to continue right here. I hope you guys are following this, because I know it's a little bit messy, but it's just for you to understand. So 1 plus root 3 all into brackets squared would be just to expand. 1 plus root 3 times 1 plus root 3 minus, now we're going to open the bracket here, minus 2. So negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 times root 3 will be negative 2 root 3 minus 2 equals 0. So 1 times 1, when we start expanding what's in the bracket, is 1. 1 times root 3 is plus root 3. Root 3 times 1 is root 3, so plus root 3. And root 3 times root 3 is just basically 3, because anytime you multiply two of the same values together that is in a square root, you just cancel out the square roots. It's just like you're saying root 3 all squared. The square root and the squared would cancel out each other, and we just have is the value that is inside the square root, which is 3 in this case. So minus 2 minus 2 root 3 minus 2 equals 0. So 1 plus 3 is 4. So 1 here plus this 3 here is 4. So this is done. This is done. When we solve for root 3 plus root 3, we know that like 3 plus 3 is 6. So anytime you have, when you're adding roots together and you have two of the same roots, it's like saying root 3 times 2, because you have 2 of it. What you have is 2 root 3. So here we have plus 2 root 3. And we can go on to do negative. So we have this is done, this is done. Then we have the value here negative 2, and the value here negative 2 root 3. And then we have negative 2 here. And we want all of this to equal 0. So 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. So basically 4 minus 2, 2 minus 2 is 0. And plus 2 root 3 minus 2 root 3 is 0. So what we have here is 0 equals a 0. So there's a check sign to show that it's correct. So we're going to do the same thing for the other one. So if you're like struggling with this material, please just pause the video, because I know this is very different from the previous examples that we've been doing so far. So just pause the video and like try to understand it and digest the material. Like take your time. So now we're going to do the second part of x sub 1. Now we see that the left side and the right side of what we just solved is the same. We know that the value that we solved for in the equation, this equation right here, is correct. So now we're going to continue the material. So back here, now we're going to do this. So this is the check. So what we have is x sub 2 equals 1 minus root 3, and we're going to put this value here back into this equation. So we put that into the value of x squared minus 2x minus 2 equals 0. So we come here to do 1 minus square root of 3 squared minus 2 times 1 minus square root of 3 minus 2 equals a 0. So 1 minus square root of 3 will be 1 minus square root of 3 times 1 minus square root of 3. So now we're going to expand this right here. So minus 2 times 1 will just give us minus 2, and minus 2 times root 3 will be minus 2 times minus root 3 will make it positive, because this value here and this value here will become positive, so positive. So 2 times root 3 is just basically 2 root 3. And yeah, so when we've expanded, then we just drop this to negative 2 down here. So this is equals to 0. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative root 3 will be negative root 3. And negative 3 times 1 is negative root 3. And negative root 3 times negative root 3. So negative times negative is positive. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is basically 3, because square root squared is just basically the value. So for example, you have a square root as the value, and then you squared it. This squared and the square root is just going to cancel, and what you have is just the value of a. So basically, when you square a square root, you're just canceling out and just keeping the value that is inside the square root, which is a. And in this particular question, what we have is 3. So that's why we have 3 here. So negative 2 now plus 2 root 3 negative 2 equals 0. And by the way, we just want the left side and the right side to be equal, and then we know we're done. So 1 minus 1 here plus 3. So 1 here plus 3 will be 4. Negative root 3 minus negative root 3 is just negative 2 root 3. And so here is done. And then we have negative 2, which comes from here, and then positive 2 root 3. And then negative 2 equals 0. So 4 here, minus 2 is 2, 2 minus 2 is 0. And then negative 2 plus negative 2 root 3 plus positive 2 root 3 is just 0. So here we just have a big 0, 0 equals 0. So this just basically means that the value that we solve for is correct, because the left side and the right side is equal. So now that we're done with example 3 and the 2 practice examples I gave you guys to study, that I gave you guys to actually do, and then you do with me, now we're actually done with the material for quadratic equations. The only thing that is left is for you to watch the rest of the video in this in this particular series of solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. And all you'd have now is just practice. So the next video I'm going to make is just going to be a whole lot of practice questions and a whole lot of solving. And immediately you're done doing all of that, then your work is done. And then I'm going to proceed in doing like solving quadratic equations using quadratic formula whenever you have fractions, quadratic equations that have fractions, or you just have like equations that are not necessarily simplified, and also solving quadratic equations using quadratic formula whenever the quadratic equation you have contains decimals. So when we're done, we're going to be done with the entire series of solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. I hope this video was beneficial for you, and I wish you all the best in your journey towards math and your respective field. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you.